Hello and welcome to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. Today, our special guest is Ravi Mikkelsen, and Ravi is the co-founder and CEO of Atmos Financial. Did I say that right, Ravi?
Yep. Atmos, however you pronounce like atmosphere is how.
So you're like atmosphere without the sphere.
Without the fear, yeah.
Without the fear, yeah. Get rid of that fear. And that kind of reminds me of why I asked you to be on the podcast. I was over there on LinkedIn and you were writing some really cool articles and I thought they were positive. And it's like there's all these people that are dooming out on all this, tax credits going away and, the change in the politics and all that kind of stuff. So I thought that was pretty cool how you're, like putting a positive spin on things. And I thought what you were saying too was not just fake positive, but I thought it was true. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was needed. I was talking to, Jigger Shaw a few months ago and sharing some of these things. He said, hey, put it on LinkedIn. He said, this needs to be out there. Like there needs to be this type of voice in our industry. And so I followed suit and it's 99.9%, positive reactivity to it. Basically the only people who have been against it are those that sort of profit from the old way of doing things. And it's that we're trying to change the high dealer fees, the high sales commissions, those folks that want that flavor of this industry to move forward rather than one that's, affordable and accessible for all.
Yeah. I've been thinking and talking about that too a lot lately, how there's all these people that were kind of like, I think you were even calling it ripping off grandma or something like that in one of your articles. Or
grandma maxing is the term that I heard.
Grandma maxing. I'd like to max my grandma and bring her out of the ground right now. That would be kind of cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, like all of these people that are there. I mean, there's like, I guess when there's an abundance of money, sometimes it brings people in that are just trying to get that money. And so then we end up with like what some people call solar bros or grandma maxers, or there's probably some other terms too.
And I'm a capitalist and I'm all for making a ton of money, but having transparency, it's like if you get somebody to say, hey, I'm going to charge you a $10,000 sales commission on this. I want to here's everything broken down. This is what I want to charge. And if, they say, well, I got a quote that's $20,000 cheaper. Why are you more expensive? It's like, well, I feel like I'm worth it. I'm like, okay, I like the confidence. I'm going to pay you $20,000 extra because you feel you're worth it. Great. Then you deserve it. But the fact that they're not being disclosed, it's just like, oh, I'm going to save you money. It's no money down. And we're just basically going it off the utility bill and pushing it all the way to the limit, which often then, doesn't create the cushion. And when those ITC loans flip over and now it jumps up by $150, $200 a month, they can't afford it, puts people in a really bad spot. And so, there are some fundamental things that need to change in this industry, and which really couldn't happen while the tax credit was in place.
Yeah, really cool. So like one of your articles was talking about $2 a watt and we can get there, and why not $1? Like in a lot of places like Australia, Philippines, like tons of, maybe I would even guess half the world, you can get solar for $1 a watt on your house.
Yeah, and I don't think we'll ever get there. Maybe.
Well, yeah, especially maybe we won't get there because of inflation and $1.
Inflation, labor costs here. Our equipment, we pay, I think it's something like our equipment is 7 times as expensive as like directly in China, 3 to 4 times what it is in Australia.
That's because we're smart.
There's a few things. It's slightly different equipment, but then also, it's farther to transport, and then we have significant tariffs on, our equipment from China as well. So there's a couple of factors there, but so it's like you take that, and then you've got these ginormous, sales commissions and dealer fees on the financing. I remember talking to this one installer a few years ago, and he was just saying, like, here's the basic model. If somebody comes to me directly, I can do it for $2 a watt. If I use one of these sales companies, they're going to say they'll sell it for $3 a watt cash, but the person's going to need a loan. And now it ends up being $378 to $425 a watt after the financing. So it's doubled the cost that that person could have paid had they gone directly to that installer.
And I'm thinking too, like with the 30% tax credit and all that kind of stuff, it might even be possible that even though they double the cost, it still might be like a good investment, like it pay for itself.
Yeah, like, somewhat depends on how you define good investment.
Like 10 years or 10-year payback or something like that.
Yeah, and there's that, and there's also, like, is it creating enough free cash flow to buffer them against, rising utility rates? Or, as often the case, when these people run into trouble, they were promised access to the tax credit that didn't materialize. This is a free check from the government. It's a government program. You're going to get 30%, via direct deposit into your account. And they're like, oh, great.
They're saying that, huh?
The worst ones are.
Mm-hmm.
But even like the well-intentioned ones are, they're not accountants. They don't know the person's tax liability. It's on the borrower. But if they don't have that money and they don't pay down the loan, then their loan payments jump up on a monthly basis. And that often puts them into hot water, and then they can't pay, and then their credit goes bad. And then like there's a positive feedback loop of negativity.
Mm-hmm.
This negative outcome, it just feeds on itself, because then, in some cases, we've actually seen people lose their homes, like in Pace in particular. And so stepping back, it's like having this in place. It's like, okay, you get up to $4 a watt, 30% tax credit. You're now essentially selling them on $2.80 a watt. And so if you're selling at $2.80 a watt, it's like, oh, this makes sense, and I'll have this buffer. Well, then maybe they included the re-roof in and that's not eligible. And maybe there's all these other things that sometimes get that pulled in, and then the amount of tax credit doesn't line up. So there are a lot of issues with this model. And, it's artificially inflating the cost. It's like, you can basically push people beyond it being a good investment and then subtract that 30% from the cost. And that's what you're selling them on, is that lower cost. And if that doesn't materialize, you're underwater.
Yeah. One of the things that I've wondered too about the 30% tax credit is how much of that really goes to the person. Like that tax credit is usually going to some, banker, some Wall Street, company that's owning a whole bunch of different, say, residential solar systems, if you're talking about residential. But whoever's using that tax credit is maybe they're getting half of it. So maybe the person in the house is getting 15%. Or do you have any idea, any guess on the numbers there? I guess it would be different for each sale.
Yeah, I mean, it all depends. If, it's like for our customers, if they're paying cash, if they're working with us or directly with a credit union or bank, they're getting like the entire value of that, because we're making sure that what's being sold isn't inflated in cost. But if you're adding on sales commission, dealer fees, all these other aspects on the purchase side, then you have value shifting from the homeowner to the sales and financing companies. In the case of a lease product like a Sunrun or Palmetto or Enfin, they own the system. And so they take all the tax credit or whoever, the tax equity in there. And in a lease situation, same with like a car, those tax credits that are available, they can say that they're passing on the savings to you, but you actually don't know how much of that they are passing forward. So the same thing in that lease, the, Sunrun or Enfin, they can essentially price it such that it appears to be saving, but you may never know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's all kinds of fine print, and I guess the sales people, the door knockers and things, they can just, shuffle the numbers around to their benefit. So you said the way that you do it, so maybe you can let us know what you're up to.
Yeah.
And what's the Atmo without the sphere?
Yeah.
Have you been to the Sphere, by the way?
In Vegas, I have not.
Okay, you got to check it out.
I've driven by it many times, but not been in it.
And once you go there, you'll be bringing the Atmos to the Sphere.
Yes, but the Atmos Sphere is the protective layer of gases that surround our planet. So, we thought of Atmos as this protective layer around the planet because we want to make, our goal is as I like to say, make slow capital fast. So banks, credit unions, green banks, government agencies, CDFIs, we allow them to deploy their capital at the point of sale, at the kitchen table. So installers can bring consumer protective capital with them into, their customer's home. And so the largest and lowest cost pool of capital in the world is the global banking sector. There's 60,000 banks, credit unions, other lenders that currently hold something like $500 trillion in assets. And to reach the scale and speed for the clean energy transition globally, we need to activate that. We can't rely on bespoke financing, around the world. It can't be a one-off. It's like, oh, we've created a new financial model. No, like banks, credit unions, they've been financing homes, they've been financing vehicles, they've been financing buildings for companies for decades, if not centuries. And it's that standard, boring, cheap capital that we need to bring to bear to really unlock the potential here. And that's what we do.
Wow. You said 500 trillion.
Something like that.
What's that, like a half a quintillion? I mean, that's just so many zeros. I need to go look it up.
Quadrillion would be
quadrillion.
Yeah.
Quadrillion, then quintillion.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's only off by 1,000-fold. It's like, don't be too hard on me.
Yeah.
Quadrillion, a half a quadrillion in those banks. I just need a little piece of that. And then, of course, I would just donate it to the Atmos. And that's, of course, the name of your company. So your company you help set people up with like credit unions and stuff like that?
Yeah. So we help in a couple of ways. And, one thing that sort of trapped this industry is like, because the dominant financing mechanism or loan mechanism has been this high dealer fee sort of teaser interest rate model. And then so these lenders give the installers a menu of different loan options. Oh, do you want to charge a 10% fee and a 10% interest rate, or a 37% fee and a 3% interest rate? And so then it's that salesperson who gets to choose the financing offer to the borrower. And then, they can use that based on how much they're paying and other factors. Or these homeowners could go to their local bank or credit union and wait a month to, find out if they qualify for a loan, if that bank or credit union is doing solar loans at all. So those were the sort of the two primary loan mechanisms. And so what we've done, how we've changed it is we charge a small flat origination fee, very similar to a bank or credit union. And then we let our banks and credit unions set their own price. And it's a marketplace where they're competing for the business of these borrowers. But it's not that we're giving them leads and then they're taking their time. They've underwritten our underwriting, and it allows us to operate at the speed of commerce. So we're at the kitchen table. Our software is there. And so we then check all of our different capital sources, the banks, credit unions, green banks, etc. Is there a rebate or something that will bring down the interest rate, for that borrower? So we take all of that account in milliseconds and bring that forward to that borrower. And so it can be at the kitchen table when the installer is there, or it can be at the kitchen table when that homeowner's just come to us. So they can come to us directly. We'll pre-qualify them, and then we'll introduce them to an installer in their area. So, they can be the forearmed with the knowledge of their financing, so that before they speak to any installer, they know what they might borrow and they can bring that with them. So they're not getting, somebody else's financing.
Cool. So are you focused more on, like, I know we're both in the Bay Area, maybe by coincidence, maybe not. And are you doing most of your business in the Bay Area, or is it nationwide?
We're nationwide. So we lend for, like I said, we've got a marketplace of banks and credit unions. One of them is Clean Energy Credit Union. And so they're a national lender. Mm-hmm. And so we help them. And then we do residential solar and storage, small business solar and storage. That one's in a few states right now, working on getting that national. We also do national residential heat pumps and electrification.
Cool. Awesome. So do people find you first? Like, if somebody's looking to get solar, do they find you, you find them? Or do installers refer to you, or does it go all different directions?
The vast majority come through our installer network. And then a small percentage, just a few percent come to us directly.
Mm-hmm.
Because most people, like when they do a search, they aren't searching for solar financing. They're searching for solar installers.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So it's just like, so when they search for that, then they find an installer. And then if that installer is working with us, then we're brought in.
So what kind of price per watt are you seeing? I guess it's different in different places. Like where we live, it's, cost of living's more for installers and all that kind of stuff. But what kind of range do you see? And then also too, it's a little bit more confusing when you say dollar per watt where we are, because you're including batteries a lot of times.
Right. And in my essays, I'm separating those out. And I think we should, as an industry, what we're starting to do in our financing is having those separated out. So, let's do solar on a dollar per watt basis, because ultimately the capex of what the homeowner pays is what sets the price of the electricity produced, those electrons.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can take that cost of electricity and see, that's filling the battery. Or if we're filling the battery with $2 a watt electrons versus $5 or $6 a watt electrons, we're significantly changing the value of that battery to the homeowner and then also potentially to the utility and the grid. Because if we have cheaper electrons in there, that battery can now economically be used in more events.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we want, is we want increased utilization of the batteries as capacity. And it's like reduce peakers, reduce other events. So we need to bring down the cost of the electrons that are produced, but also the cost of installing those batteries. 50 cents a watt hour. A couple of years ago, it was $2 plus a watt hour. It's going to be $25,000 for a Tesla Powerwall. Now it's, I'm seeing a lot of sort of like the 10 to 15,000 for a first and like 5 to 7 for a second.
Mm-hmm. For the battery. Yeah.
Yeah, for the battery. And that also varies. We had that sort of silly law here in California where only licensed electricians, I forget which C rating they were.
C10. Yeah. C10.
Only C10s were allowed to lift the battery to install, like host it onto the wall. If your C10, is 120 pounds, but you've got, a day labor is 250, it's like you don't want to use the muscles to lift it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's like California is like, oh no, only a licensed electrician should physically lift the battery off the ground to put in the wall. Like, it is insane laws like this that add unnecessary expense to these installations.
Yeah. And then in California too, we have the C46, which is the solar contractor's license, and they don't let them do batteries anymore. They used to, and then they changed that.
That was also that was the other part of that year's insanity. So there's these other factors like on the battery side that are keeping costs high there. So it's like we get those two things down, and then also with that solar, that $2 a watt, cost. Now, even in areas where you have cheap natural gas, you can also, get bill savings by getting a heat pump, by induction stove. In areas of cheap gas, often there's a monthly bill increase by electrifying. And so we need to reduce those dollar per kilowatt hour electricity costs even further to offset that.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay. And are you seeing like just the solar systems that you're involved with at $2 a watt?
Sorry, I went on this long rant and I didn't get to your original question of like what prices are we seeing across the country?
No, we're having a conversation. That's awesome.
Yeah. And we are seeing, know some installers that are doing below $2 a watt already.
Mm-hmm.
They're very efficient. They've got their processes dialed in, a lot of word of mouth growth.
And where are they? Because that's awesome.
Texas, a couple in the Northeast or like mid-Atlantic. I think I saw one or two like sort of central Midwest. California, significantly more expensive. And, parts I have seen some like $2.50 to $3 a watt here, 3 to 4, like New York, Massachusetts, California are like I think our most expensive states. And, so it's like in my essay, talk about customer acquisition, financing, permitting and interconnection, equipment costs, and then O&M. And I'm about to release the next essay on the financing side and go through all of these steps. But it's like, so with these, for the most part, I hear interconnection is a greater problem for our installers than permitting is. And also a wide variety. Some are saying like, oh, permitting is a huge problem, and some are saying not a problem at all. So I think one of the pushbacks that we see is like, oh, let's do refined permitting, is that, we have 18,000 AHJs in this country, and they're all different. Some are friendly, some are not, some are efficient, some are not. And so, we see these average numbers put out. The error bars on them are so wide that, it's almost an unevenly wide variety across our 50 states plus DC and Puerto Rico. 100% support standardization of permitting and online instant applications for certain criteria, and that will help. But the actual benefits are going to vary greatly across the country. That's not all going to be a $3,000 savings across the board.
Okay, great. We interrupt you for a very important announcement. Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast has been brought to you by Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. That's right, Sean White is sponsoring his own podcast, and he wants to remind you to go check out some of his classes. You can go to SolarSEAN, that's solar, SEAN.com, and then click on the links to check out his classes. You can check out his heat spring classes, and you can also hire him to teach classes for you, like at your company, something like that. Now back to the show. Yeah, and if you might have heard a little bit of loss of what I was saying for a second there, because there's a turkey walking around in front of my satellite transmitter receiver. But you'll only find that here on this podcast from the Solar Training Center over here in Canyon, California. So that we're keeping it real.
Yeah. What a turkey.
Yeah, what a turkey. And then just like before we got started too, we were having a little bit of a conversation. I was like, hey, let's save it for the show. You were going to tell me your origin story, and just some other interesting things. Is just by coincidence, the guy that built the house that I'm sitting in, and he's a guy that I've known for pretty much my whole life. His name's Deva Rajan, and he started this company called Canyon Construction. And so I thought that was pretty cool. Hey, Turkey, go to Deva's house. I'm trying to do a podcast here with Ravi.
Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty cool. And you were about to tell me your origin story. So let's hear the Ravi Mikkelsen origin story.
Yeah. So there's sort of the things like, Danger is my middle name. Well, Solar is my first name.
Oh, that's cool.
Not many people can say they went into the industry that they're, that is their namesake.
So you did it at birth?
Yeah.
And was it a womb name? Did they pick your name before you were born, or you might not even know?
No. Huh? So I was born in India, and my parents were there studying meditation, and we lived in ashram. And so the head monk, where we live in, gave me my name.
Oh, cool.
So named by a monk at birth to go into solar.
All right.
And then...
That was a smart monk.
Very. And then when I was 18, I was entering the University of Washington as a would-be engineer. And they sort of, of the 600 people that were there on that orientation day, there's 30 to 40 of us would-be engineering students, and the rest were in the normal student section, like in the giant auditorium. So we're in this side classroom, and this woman comes in and says, hey, there's this really cool program, research exchange program with the university in China. Right away, you start working with graduate students here in the US on things like water quality testing, eco-friendly materials, renewable energy. And then she said a bunch of other things that I couldn't hear anymore. It's like they turned off the lights and put a spotlight on her. There's this massive heat ray into my chest. This voice that says, Ravi, this is your mission in life. It's help the world transition off of fossil fuels. So I was like, all right. It's just sort of so I picked it. I went into materials engineering, started doing research right away on hydrogen fuel cells, and then did some work on photovoltaics. But for the last 2.5 decades, this has been my daily practice and mission is to help the world transition.
Yeah, it's really cool being in this industry. Sometimes I see friends that are not in the industry, and they're just they're not making the world better, and they're kind of boring, It's and it's not just that we're making the world better too. It's really important, and it's also pays well. It's if you were in the solar industry 30 years ago, maybe not.
Yeah. I mean, it's, so interesting. So it's when engineering, research into deployment, and like physical into digital and then into finance, sort of saw that as the biggest lever to move the world. But so many of my friends who didn't understand what I was doing, 20 some years ago, they're now doing this. Like, they went into finance or accounting, and now they're managing renewable energy procurement for a massive tech company, or, they work for a renewable energy developer. Like, it is so much more common now to have this be a general tech company like Google or Apple or Microsoft. And so it is spreading across all these other sectors and companies. It's pretty awesome to see. It's not so lonely anymore as it was for us all those decades ago, Sean.
Yeah, yeah. And it is amazing when you kind of zoom out and see how fast everything's been growing and how the price of everything's gone down. And I just think that, like a lot of times too, just people in general have a tendency to go like, oh, this changes everything. This is the worst decade. This is the worst year. But when you zoom out and you look like, well, people were dying when they were 40 on average. And, like people were riding horses and they couldn't go that fast. And they were like getting sick and everything smelled like manure. And we didn't have good sewage. And we had all these world wars and all this kind of stuff. If you just ask like your average person on the street, they might say like, oh yeah, more people are dying from wars right now. And it's like, no, it's never been so low. But we have better news coverage, so we could, watch the videos and the TikToks and the YouTubes and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, things are getting better, and the solar industry is growing like crazy. And we do have little bumps in the road. Anytime that you have this exponential logarithmic growth, you're going to have volatility where it goes up and down on its way up. And it's going to go up. It's not like this tax credit is the end. And then we have people like you out there that are showing us how it could actually bring it on even better, because now we don't have to deal with all this, tax credit chasing and door knockers and bad reputations for people that are scammers and all that out there. And they could just, go to a credit union, get a loan, get the solar installed for under $2 a watt. And I was thinking too, like that under $2 a watt that you were talking about, that there's solar installers that are doing that. We should clone those people. Like if you know one of them that wants to be on the podcast, I'd love to talk to them. They should let us know how they're doing it, and that'll help change the world.
Yeah, definitely. I'll reach out to some. And, I'm really pushing for like, a coalition of the strong tail installers and those that support the strong tail like we do, versus the national installers. And, generally it's the national installers that get more press, but they're also more expensive because they spend a lot more on marketing. And so they have those higher fees.
So these under $2 a watt residential people, are they pretty much like small one-shop companies?
Like one crew companies? No.
Or I say one shop, like they're only in one city. It's not like they have like offices around the country. Or I'm sure there's variability.
Yeah, I think it's usually a single shop, or maybe one or two. Like they've merged with one in a similar company in a neighboring state, and they're like, hey, let's join forces. I want to retire. And they sort of, the younger CEO like acquired the older one, and then they retired, and like now it's one company.
So that's kind of cool. So that means that people should go find those kind of companies too.
Definitely. And one thing I want to so even a decade ago, as we were talking about reaching certain dollar per watt targets, one of the biggest pushbacks, especially from installers, was that I have to make margin. I have to feed my kids. Like I can't be the one to take the brunt. And that's where so much of this has been put. But actually, like in this model that I'm putting forward in these essays, it's about removing the waste from the system. And this actually can make, increase the margins for those installers. And that's what I want to do. It's like, hey, let's strengthen these small local companies. And so it's changing solar selling to solar buying. If you have, a well-educated population, they're like, oh, wait, this is like a dryer or a dishwasher. I should have solar and battery storage because it's going to save me money and give me resilience, and every house should have this. And they know what the cost should be. They can call up and, they see the value everywhere, but they don't know the cost. And so if we have that information, they can now go out in a more informed way and speak to different installers and find the one that works with them. So, this needs to be a way to help support our local strong tail businesses. And then the other thing to do, and I've been working on the data because I saw this a few years ago and haven't been able to find it, so I'm just reproducing it now, is I saw this chart and it showed the dollar per watt cost of installation. So it was residential solar cost of installation versus annual installation volume. And so as the dollar per watt cost decreased, installation volume increased, like more people could afford to go. And in that chart, it showed a relationship of, for every reduction in cost of 36%, we saw a doubling of volume. And so the data I'm seeing now are showing more of a 40%. For every reduction of 40%, we're seeing a doubling of volume. But that, if we go from $4 or $5 a watt down to $2 a watt, that's multiples. So it's not just we're going to increase some. This is like a 3 to 5x potential increase of business for our installers for this transition. And now instead of, we had, I think it was like 750,000 people went solar last year. Now, what if 2 or 3 million homes added solar each year? Like, that is a phenomenal. Now those people are going into work and saying, hey, what can we do here? You know what? Actually, that EV looks pretty awesome. I'm going to get one. I'm going to power it with my free electrons. So it's really going to be the exponential curve that we've expected when we drop the cost to what it can get to.
Cool, man. Well, thanks for helping make this happen. And I just think that this is like super important, and it's super important for people out there to know that we can get under $2 a watt. And I want to hear from those people that are doing it. And for those people that are out there doing $4 a watt, and we're not talking about batteries, where's the money going? And you got to think, though, like, what about those poor solar salesmen that might not be so ethical, and those poor billionaire CEO bonuses and all, with their bonuses? Doesn't all that money trickle down to us? I mean, shouldn't we start worrying about, didn't Elon just get all these billions of dollars? It's, eventually that's going to go somewhere.
Then it goes somewhere, Elon has become quite the firebrand, but like Tesla, the company, as a national installer, they're amazing. Like, if you look at, you go put in a random address across the country, they're in the $2 a watt something, across the country. Huh. Like, they are much lower cost than the other national installers. So they're doing amazing work there. And so just want to make that distinction for a lot of people in our industry have sort of moved away from the brand because of, his political views and his tweets. But, we should recognize and celebrate the amazing work that they're doing to drive down cost and bring manufacturing into the US.
They just have to figure out some way to get the turkeys away from the little Starlink dish that I have here. Maybe I should put it up on a pole. But that's interesting. So they're a lot lower priced than, say, their competitors that are, the big national guys. And then I guess you probably check that often.
Not too often, but when I can, yeah.
Do you think they're going to get below $2 a watt after this tax credit's gone?
I think potentially in some parts. They have a very efficient system, so it's harder for them to squeeze. And also, I think they'll get it in some markets, but harder, at that scale in California, Massachusetts. I think there's a lot of exogenous factors that need to come down for them to approach that in those other markets.
Yep.
And I think, they're doing more domestic manufacturing, and so it's that equipment. So as that scales up, that equipment comes down, reducing customer acquisition, reducing, on customer acquisition, part of the permitting and interconnection costs are not directly the fees that are paid or the time spent filling out forms. It's that the delays from those projects cause cancellation. So if you delay something too long and cancel, now all of the money that you've put in has to then be spread across the rest of your projects. And so that's really the driving factor on the value of reducing the permitting and interconnection costs. The time reduces the overall customer acquisition and operations costs.
Yep. So I guess we should get all the different AHJs to sign up with Solar App, and everybody do Soul Smart, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think even more important than solar app or online permitting is standardization. It's like if you're working in more states, it's like the more areas you work in, if there isn't standardization, even if you're doing it digitally, you still have to track all the different rules. And if you're like, oh, you copy your Fremont, California rules and you're doing in Oakland and they're different, you get rejected and now it's another 2-3 weeks, that's not as helpful. If we have standardization, it's just like one rule per state, even better nationally, with some customization for hurricane versus earthquake versus snow versus hail risk.
Sure.
Then it will really like speed things up. And then online instant applications and approvals like Solar App or another platform would be awesome.
Yep. Great. So we got to get all those AHJs to work together to bring the prices down. I think too, though, sometimes you just have people liking to do things their own way. And it's kind of, it's like, I'm powerful. I'm smarter than everybody else. I know how permitting should really be done. And then people just start doing it differently. And I kind of always thought too, that it brings us back to the early days of the 13 colonies getting together. And that's sort of just in our DNA as Americans, is like, we're going to do it different in every different place. Whereas if you go to some place like Germany, they do have it all streamlined in one way for the whole country for residential.
We did just have great success. Texas, Florida, and New Jersey passed permitting reform legislation this year. Like Permit Power is an amazing organization to support that's driving this forward. And essentially, they're creating that standardization. So Texas is saying, hey, no local jurisdiction can have requirements stricter than, the state or national electric code. And so if New York or California, Massachusetts put something like that in place, like that would significantly reduce the barriers. We have almost, I think, with our 5 million residential installations across the country, we have enough data to say, this is how it should be done safely. Let's standardize and simplify this process.
Yeah, and sometimes it just gets political. Like I was working for somebody looking at some of the rules over in Illinois, and they have certain things in there that's just, I don't want to get myself in trouble, but they're trying to make it so certain trades can only do certain things and the other trades can't do it. And it just brings up the cost. And it's like, do you really need an electrician to run a pile driving machine? Stuff like that,
Yeah, it's like all of those things. And then there's these, because of the bad acting, we're seeing these consumer protection laws being placed, like one just passed in Nevada. Which could significantly hamper solar growth because it puts such strict requirements on lenders, on installers, etc., that it's hard for us to do. Like we are very consumer protective and transparent, but certain things like having, and don't know all of the requirements, but I was speaking with somebody yesterday on this. He said there's a production guarantee requirement in there inside of the loan agreement. And, it's like if you get a credit union loan for a car and if you don't get 32 miles to the gallon, you only get 28. Can you now, void your loan to the auto company? No, like you can't. So it's very strange that, they're putting in all of these rules, well-intentioned rules that are going to have, these consequences of, we're going to make it so hard to do solar. We're going to protect you. You're not going to be cheated by a solar installer because no one's going to install in this state anymore. Like that's sort of like the worst case scenario of these types of laws.
Well, maybe that's a good thing about the tax credit going away. It makes things simple. And then another thing is it gets rid of some of this extra gravy that people are going after. And so, all that extra money just leads to having people that are like unethical salespeople and, bad lending practices, fine print and big long contracts that you click through and you don't have time to read and you don't have a team of attorneys to read it, like the team of attorneys that wrote it. So it'll probably make it so solar doesn't get a bad reputation for having all these salespeople. I listened to this one solar sales podcast just to see what they're doing. I'm kind of spying on them and stuff. And they were just like, what am I supposed to do? I have to go find another industry now. And I'm sure you're really sad about that.
Yeah. I mean, I've been talking about, getting those folks out of the industry for a while. So it's, if you're charging $1 a watt, sales commission, or you're charging a 20-30% dealer fee, like, you either have to change or go into a different industry, in my opinion. There isn't a place for that. The dealer fee, sure, it's this buy down the interest rate for, for a small subset of folks that might be a good value for them. But the vast majority of people putting solar and solar plus battery storage, they're going to pay this off in 6 or 7 years. And so that high dealer fee, low interest rate is a really bad deal economically. If you're going to have a high upfront fee and a low interest rate, you need to carry out the loan to the entire term, 21, 22 plus years, in order for that to make greater value, just like on a total payments basis. And so our model of low fee, fair interest rate from our credit union lenders, it actually incentivizes them to get better financing from a mortgage or a HELOC or something like that, pay off the solar loan, and now they're saving even more money. We've made solar cheaper by having them pay it off faster versus more expensive.
Yeah, it sounds like with these dealer fees that people are just being real tricky. It's like, as far as a customer is concerned, it's like dealer fee, interest rate, or whatever, or financing fees, all that kind of stuff. It's like, what matters is just how much you pay, and you don't want to have to pay that much.
Exactly. And, there are those that try to explain and be transparent with it. And there's a lot that, some of these lenders, we've heard that they've put into their terms with the installers that they weren't allowed to share about the fees with the customers. They weren't allowed to be transparent.
I'd like to talk to some of them on the podcast.
Yeah. And so it's really about, it's like, if you think this is a good value, it should be communicated. Like, hey, this is what we're doing and we think it's a good value. And then let the borrower choose, let the homeowner choose. So yeah, huge opportunity here, but there are things that need to work in the installers, in the financing companies, government agencies. So at the state level to reform permitting, the public utility commissions and the utilities on interconnection approval. We need to bring down equipment costs. That means more manufacturing in the US and, higher volumes. And, I'm pushing for $2 a watt by the end of 2026. It's a very aggressive goal.
People are already doing it. Yeah.
Some are, but it's like, I want the national average to be that.
So then if that national average is there, then those guys that were already doing it at $2 a watt, maybe they'll be at $1.50.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and then it's like, let's get the national average there. So it's just like, keep removing waste, keep removing inefficiencies in the system, and switching from solar selling to solar buying. And like, imagine going to Home Depot or IKEA and grabbing a stack of panels and bringing them back and a battery, and maybe getting the introduction to a vetted installer there, or getting instructions on how to do it yourself, or, in off-grid backup.
Cool. And then they could take my class to figure out how to do that. I even have a free intro class.
Amazing. They definitely should. It's like, I think the DIY sector is going to be pretty significant in the coming years. Like, I remember when I did my first grid alternatives, like volunteer day install, like a decade, something like 2014, something like that. And essentially, was on this job, and there's this guy who picked up this impact driver, and he's like, what is this? I'm like, it's an impact driver. He's like, what does it do? And I'm like, have you never held one before? He's like, no. He's been in the solar industry for 10 years. He did like utility scale, like design, like these massive plan sets and all of this like financial and, megawatts and megawatts of projects, but he never even held a battery, like a tool before, a handheld tool before. And within an hour with instruction, he was installing racking into the rafters of this house. And we were then like sliding in panels, putting the connectors together on the microinverters to string them together. And it's like, okay, if somebody who had never even held a tool before, within 1 hour of coming on site, is installing racking and putting panels together with inverters, there's people that can like do a very significant amount of the work to do a grid connect. It's like, okay, maybe I'm going to do this part, and then I'm going to hire a local electrician to then, come in, check it, connect it to the service, got another service that does the permitting, the interconnection, the software side of things. Like, I think there's this huge hybrid model that can come about to further accelerate this.
Yeah, I've had people contact me and say like, I'm doing my own, do it yourself DIY solar system, and I want you to come and like check it, make sure it looks good, help me wire up the inverter. And it's been a while since I did that, but I did it, it was good. The house is still standing,
Yeah. And I think it's like, in terms of like the number of jobs that you can do, it's like that then significantly increases the number of jobs that you can do if the homeowner is doing a good portion of the work themselves.
That's interesting, to bring the price of solar down because you have the homeowner on your team,
Yeah. They run down to Home Depot, pick up the equipment. Like, they've got the list. They went to some online tool, found, here's this. They paid $25 for a plan set, have all of that. They're like, okay, this is what I need to do. They know where their rafters are. They come and install it. They've, connected with you already. And
they get all the liability in case it leaks. It's their own fault.
Yeah.
It makes it cheaper for the installer.
So I think it will be a great thing. There's definitely something to be said for the homeowner's insurance and how that will be handled if them doing the installation voids that. But I think that will be worked out, just like all things.
Something was interesting is I was at the Intersolar Smarter E conference in May in Germany, and I met a couple of people that were balcony solar installers. And so you might have heard of balcony solar, and you can just go buy it and you just plug it in, and it might have a battery. You read the instructions and you just plug it in the wall. And these guys had a business where they would help people do that. And I was like, well, if you're supposed to do it yourself, what do they need you for? And he's like, yeah, because we know how to do it right. And it just, it's like kind of complicated to assemble it together. Maybe it would even be like somebody assembling your IKEA furniture for you or something like that. And they were, wire management, making sure it's done right and all that kind of stuff. But I thought it was kind of a creative career.
Yeah, a little task rabbit. Yeah, I mean, balcony solar is awesome. There was this startup in San Francisco years ago. Do you remember trying to, like, basically it looked like a big, like, iMac monitor.
Did it have, it was like solar with a battery or something?
Yeah, it was like solar with a battery. It was beautiful. It looked like an Apple monitor or like a big iMac.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at their like demo at the Battery Club in San Francisco, it was like super fancy. And, it's like you could run a circular saw and like you could string them together. It was like you just plug it into an outlet. And another friend in San Francisco, he had solar panels like on the roof and just like ran wires down and a battery inside. So it's doable. One difference between the US and Germany is that in Germany, I think they already have like a dedicated circuit installed, where in the US, it's like we don't. And there's like risk of backfeeding and things like there's just some greater risk of fire and other things here.
Yeah, we're more into safety here, and they cut down all their trees thousands of years ago, and we have wooden houses. But yeah, the NEC, the National Electrical Code, doesn't allow us to like share your solar with something else that you might plug in.
Yeah, it's like the generation and consumption can't be on the same line. Yeah, it can be done. It's just not allowed.
Yeah. Well, very cool, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's really cool what you're doing and bringing the price of solar down. How will people find you so you can help them save the planet? Because you've been in doing solar since the day you were born. You've been in the solar industry.
Yeah. It's, whether they want to save the planet, save money, save the grid, improve our national security from an energy standpoint. So many reasons to support solar and storage here in the US, and residential solar in particular. So, joinatmos.com is our website.
And how do we spell that?
JOIN.
JOIN.
ATMOS.
ATMOS, out of the atmosphere. Join Atmos. And we're going to put all this stuff in the show notes too.
Yeah. I mean, if you put my first and last name together, I will be found. I'm not like a John Smith, a Sanskrit first name, a Danish last name. I can't do anything bad because it will live on the internet forever, and it will be attached.
I know, not like with a generic Sean White type of name.
Yeah, exactly. So, email me first. It's just Ravi@joinatmos.com. Find me on LinkedIn. Please find and comment on these essays, point out where they can be better, and then, join us. Like, that's why we have Join Atmos. It's like, hey, this is a collective effort. And so if you're an installer in this space, sign up. It's a fast onboarding, and we can have as fast as instant approvals on consumer loans. And we're trying to spread the word, bring down the costs, and improve margins for our strong tail and partners.
Great. That is so awesome. So thanks everybody for listening to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage podcast, where you can listen, you can get educated, and you can bring down the price of residential solar below $2 a watt. You can check out my classes. Go to SolarSEAN.com, and we're going to do it. And just one more thing I wanted to mention too is this podcast was mainly about residential solar, because utility scale solar already is about $1 a watt in the United States, something like that. So pretty cool. Thanks, Ravi Mikkelsen. Thanks so much. And we're going to have to hang out sometime. We're close to each other. When I just read your articles, I had no idea where you were. And it's like I could actually walk to your house from here. I have actually walked that far before, but I'd be a little bit better off riding a bicycle.
For sure.
It's pretty cool. And then next time you're out over here in Canyon, stop by, see what we're doing. We're making this solar training center. And then I was just at the ASIS, American Solar Energy Society conference, and I am running the Northern California chapter of ASIS, which is called NorCal Solar. And so this solar training center is going to be organized under NorCal Solar. And we are going to even have pumped hydroelectric power. We have 2 reservoirs at different levels. And so it's going to be super, super awesome. I just saw like turkeys hanging out with deer today. We're going to have some bass in the lake. I'm really excited, but right now there's a lot of work to be done.
Fantastic. Yeah, can't wait.
Yeah,
well, cool. And to see you at RE Plus too.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, let's hang out, and we could do this again too sometime. Some more fun conversations. And keep writing these articles on LinkedIn, and I'm going to put those in the show notes too. Very important articles on LinkedIn. Breaking the $2 a watt barrier, how residential solar can become unstoppable by 12/31/2026, and killing the grandma maxing economy, transforming solar selling into solar buying. Woo!